Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Sustainable Stace. I hope your day is going great. It's about to get better. We're talking about putting in a raspberry bed in the middle of winter so that you can reap an awesome harvest in the middle of summer. Let's get into it.
I'm Stace. For me, healthy food and sustainability are totally connected. You can grow it yourself. Nature is generous.
As the days go by and our kids get older and bigger and hungrier, certain loves rise to the surface, certain food loves, and one that's clearly risen to the top is raspberries. Everybody in our family loves to eat raspberries, and I gotta say, they don't get picked on by the birds as much as some other berries, and they're really beautiful, fresh or frozen. So great for smoothies in the middle of winter, wonderful for sauces on something like pancakes or crepes for breakfast, and obviously amazing fresh. So I've just put in a raspberry bed here. It'll be my third one in this garden, and it's gonna have a new variety of raspberries I've not used before. They really come on at the end of summer, more even into early fall, whereas all my other raspberries perform best in late spring, early summer. So we're gonna have raspberries for a longer season because of this bed that we're gonna put in. Now you can totally grow raspberries in clumps or in permaculture groupings, and I'll cut to a little bit of that later to show you about that. But here I wanna show you what I did and why I did it to set up this bed right here. I just wanna talk you through quickly what I did here and show you some time lapse of how I did it. Not to take any extra of your time, but just to show you the steps if you want to see what I did and why I did it. This bed's about 5 meters long, 15 feet. The critical thing for spacing is I use inches or centimeters to know that I'm going to have the same space between all the raspberries that we're going to plant in here. It's 180 inches long. I want 18-inch spacing, so I'm going to get 10 plants in here, 18 inches apart for the 180 inches. Raspberries where I live, because it's heavy soil where I live, lots of clay, it holds on to water, and we get a lot of rain on the west coast of Canada. Raspberries need a couple key things to be addressed at the soil level. They have to have good drainage. So if you don't do a raised bed, you're gonna have to dig out a trench, and you're gonna have to put sand or gravel in it just to make sure the water can run away. That's if you're in a place with heavy soil and heavy rains. And because I have heavy soil and heavy rains, a raised bed is by far the easiest. I've got another raised bed of raspberries behind me as well. I love the idea of about 20 centimeters or 8 inches. That works really well. I had some big timbers here, so I built a bed and I filled it up. This is a nice width as well. It's a bit over 2 feet wide, about 2/3 of a meter, and it's a nice width so that once I put the raspberries down the middle and we've got them all in there, we're going to be able to put different ground cover down to make sure no weeds and no moisture get up and out, but that's another part a little bit later on. So we got a raised bed. It's 5 meters long or 180 inches. We're going to be able to space our raspberries in here about 18 inches apart. There's drip irrigation line that I've put in, and you'll see that I notched out the log at that end where I'm pointing so that the drip irrigation come right from the blueberries where it's watering further up the garden and come right into here. So all the raspberry canes are going to be planted along that drip irrigation. I filled in this with soil, then with some compost that I had rotted out, and then with some rotted out chicken manure, and that's all layered there, and you can see me in the video time lapse in here bringing in soil, bringing in compost, bringing in chicken manure, and it's all leveled out. And then this is going to get some topping after I've got the berries in. That's going to be more mulch-like, holding in moisture and repressing weeds. Mulch works great as straw, as leaves, or as bark chips, as long as it's not cedar, because cedar will be too acidic and it'll harm. Acidic. Let's talk about the soil. Most of your veggies in your garden like 6.5 pH. Raspberries like a little bit lower soil. They like 5.5 or 6. Now this did used to be an area growing some blueberries, and so the soil's pretty acidic already. If you wanted to make it more acidic and lower your pH, you add maybe a little bit of sulfur. If you think it's too acidic and you have to raise the pH, you'd want to add a little bit of lime. Those would be the easiest ways. Sulfur to take your pH down and get more acidic, lime to take your pH up and have it more alkaline. So that's the soil pH, the raised, the drainage, the width, the spacing, and you'll see at each end I've knocked in a pressure-treated post. Those pressure-treated posts are going to be useful a little later on, once we have the raspberries in, to string a wire at 2 levels. And you'll see that at each end, on both of those posts, I put a screw in 2 places. One is 2 feet off the ground, 24 inches, which is 60 centimeters. And the next one is about 40 inches off the ground, so a bit over a meter off the ground. And that's going to be 2 wires that are going to run end to end so that we can connect each cane as it grows to the wire to ensure that when it gets loaded with leaves and loaded with fruit, that in wind or harsh conditions, the cane won't break over and get stepped on or get broken off, or the fruit could get damaged. So those screws are in those posts to ultimately attach the cane, which will be the last thing we do when we sign off on this video. So with that as an overview of what we did, we're going to go look at the canes that we've got ready to dig up. And if you don't have canes ready to dig up, you'll want to go to a gardening center, and late winter, early spring would be the perfect time to bring your canes in. They'll be bare on the end of what looks like a dead stick or dead branch, and you'll soak them in water and get them spaced into your bed. So let's go look at the canes, and we'll get ready to dig them up and then place them here. A couple years ago I put in this little garden suite on our property, and I wanted to create a little permaculture bed that would provide a little privacy to the patio sitting area outside. So I put in this little bed. There's comfrey, a tiny little maple tree, a few bamboo, and I planted one raspberry cane. Now this raspberry cane has been let go wild on purpose just to create as much visual cover as possible, and I just want to shout out to this raspberry and show you what it's done in the year or so that I've left it unchecked. Isn't this cool? Now I'm in the exact same place with the exact same berries, but it's a little bit later in the season. Now the original cane that was planted that started this incredible bustling little colony of raspberries is probably this one or one of the ones next to it, and you can see these are the tallest. They're more than 6 feet or about 2 meters tall. And then as they've spread their underground roots, and keep noticing that as they populate and reproduce, they spread underground. You have to be mindful of that. Their underground roots have spread further and further away from the mothership, and as we get over this way, they're shorter and shorter. They're only around the height of my knee. So when I'm getting ready to work with these guys right now, I can see that in some cases the canes are very dead, and I want to show this to you at the camera. Here's a dead one that's not going to produce any next year, whereas here's a live one that will produce something next year. I'll just snip the two so you can see the difference. Okay, so this one's alive. It's green and it's lively, and you can see it's going to bend. It's somewhat pliable, whereas this one has completely finished producing, and listen, it's totally brittle. It would be a good fire starter, but it's not going to produce. So I'm not going to move a dead cane that's totally done and it's totally last year. I'm going to only move the lithe ones that are limbler and supple that I know are going to do well. And just remember that as I'm digging these up, I'm going to make them shorter right away, and I'm going to make them shorter that's very relevant to the heights of the screws that the wires are going to run along, which I'm going to tie them to. Now I've just checked against my body, and the two screws that I'm going to run wires between are roughly at my knee and at my belt. So anything I'm going to cut, if I'm going to cut it off so that it's easier to handle and move, I'm going to cut it off above my knee or above my belt a bit, if possible, so that I have something nice to tie to with the ties that we're going to attach it to a little later on. Now this is a great permaculture bed because, as I've noticed in that prior video when everything was active earlier in the season, there's a lot of things growing here, and I want to make more space for the comfrey that's on my left and for the little maple tree that's hidden in here amidst all the bamboo. And I really do want the bigger, more mature canes to be the ones that I want to take with me, and the ones that are further away and smaller here, I'm going to leave more of them and let them populate and maybe come back this way. But by taking the big guys out, I'm going to leave space for these plants over here. So I'm going to top them like about chest high or something like that, and then get into digging them. And as we noted, we have space up at that new bed for probably about 10 plants. So I'm just going to work through topping these at a nice height where I think they're going to be good to tie up and get ready to go for the next season in their new home. And each location, I'm hoping to do 10, I'm going to have 1 or 2 canes hopefully to go into that space. So we're just counting off what we have and hopefully get at least 10 canes, or even 15 or 20, but 10 locations where there's going to be 1 or 2 canes each. And once I've got these all trimmed up, the ones that I want to move, then I'll try to dig up the big mother root, separate it all out and tease the roots out. And when you buy your raspberry canes, if you buy them from a store, they're going to be tiny little sticks that are just the length of your hand with probably more roots than stick. The cane will be very short because they'll be probably a year behind in terms of growth development. Don't be intimidated. They will have life and they will grow. So I'm just going to work away on this, and we'll get them in the wheelbarrow and moving up to the upper garden and get them in place at their new home. So what I've done here, because these are all tight together, is I've gone in a circle all the way around this clump, because this is the best clump of potential canes for us. And I've got that all lifted up, so it all lifts out as one big clump. Soda, can you get back? Good boy. And I just want to show you what the roots will look like. Some will be very viable and some may not. So here's a really good example. Here's a single cane that's come out, and you can see the heavy, heavy soil at our place, and the roots are holding on, and I'll just keep it like that. Get any weeds that are involved in their out, and that's going to transplant just fine and hold up. So I'm just looking for 10 or more of those to put into 10 clumps in the new bed, and we're just going to dig those up, tease them all out. In this case, and by the way, they're prickly, these ones, so I'm wearing gloves now. This is definitely 3 canes all coming off one root system. I'm not going to try to separate that further. I think it would all fall apart. You can see the canes, the roots rather, in this place are like 2 hand spans away from this. I just want to keep that. That'll be one clump for one location. And we'll just pull them all out, and then we'll move back to the bed and get them in place. And so I know that I've got my spacing of about 50 centimeters or 18 inches all the way along. And now I'm just going to dig a hole, sink them in, and it's obviously going to be a little bit tippy because it's quite a small amount of root and not a lot to hold it in place, which is where it's going to get in extremely valuable to put the wires in and tie the canes in as well. So we'll just roll through this. Okay, we're getting there. We've got 10 sets of canes grouped and spaced evenly through here. I've tried to push them down either with my feet or my hands, so they're well in place, but there's a few more finishing steps, and we'll just jump into those now. Okay, remember the 2 screws that are in the post. I've got one here that's a bit above my belt loop, 40 inches, a bit over a meter, meter and a third, and this one's at about 24 inches, 60 centimeters, a bit higher than my knee. I've got a roll of wire here. I've already attached it at the far end. I'm going to cut it off a little extra here with my wire clippers, and the purpose of the screw is to make sure the wire is anchored and cannot slide down the pole. You can do this the way you wish. My recommendation is above the screw, not below the screw. I wrap it around the post 2 times, and then once I'm at the screw, I wrap it around the screw 2 times, and I just tuck the tail away so that it can't grab anybody or snag anybody. That can be obviously tightened up a little bit if you wish, and you've got to have your posts in nice and tight, but just by snugging that a bit, again above the wire, around twice and around twice, and there you've got a nice tight wire, and now we've got a place to tie them to. So now I'm just going to put the second higher wire in, and then we'll start tying off our canes. Once I've got my wires up, I use these little plastic, very reusable ties. If you want to understand more about why I use these rather than string or twine, check out my thornless blackberries video and I'll explain my rationale. Some of these ties I've used for more than 10 years, and I use them on grapes, thornless blackberries, and raspberries. All I'm going to do is go along, and if it's the top line that the cane reaches to, I'll tie it there. If it's only the bottom line that the cane reaches to, I'll tie it there. And the goal is to give it a little bit of extra room so that the cane can grow a bit fatter, cane can grow a bit taller, and it'll be okay if the cane slides back and forth a little bit along the wire, as long as it can't fall over when it gets heavy with leaves or heavy with fruit, especially when it's windy. So I'm going to tie these off. We're going to insulate these puppies, and we'll have nailed it. So all I'm doing is just getting around the wire and around the cane, leaving a little bit of growing room, and usually giving it about 3 twists, and that cane is good. And just do that again and again, around the wire, around the cane, give it a little bit of room to fatten up if it needs to, give it 3 twists, and it's there. That's all we need to do. So we've got all the canes tied off, but in some cases the canes, when I chopped them and I was cutting them out of the ground and busting up the root systems, I didn't cut them in a nice place. So I'm going to have a very thoughtful look over the tops of every one of the canes and trim or prune them as necessary to make sure it's an optimal cut. If you want to understand the rationale behind why I'm doing it, just take a look at my YouTube video called How to Prune Fruit Trees. Here you've got a bud or a shoot right on this side. I want to go above that at a 45. So I'm just going to go there with my cutter and trim it. This one also is on a flat, and it's not a good spot, so there's the bud or the shoot. I'm going to go just above it and at a 45 again. And in that way, I've got a much better way and a much better cut. I know these are going to do very well. Okay, we're going to wrap up this project by insulating the roots. Remember, we're insulating both from extreme heat and extreme cold, because actually raspberry roots don't go very deep, and they're fragile little dudes, so we got to be very kind to them. If you have insulated roots, you have very happy raspberries that they can manage the extremes. Leaves work really well, straw works really well, but I'm going to use my 3-way combo that I use all the time. I'm going to put down cardboard, coffee sacks, and as you see in the back, some bark chips or mulch, and with that we will have it nailed. It'll be keeping out the roots of any weeds that want to come up. It'll be holding in the moisture so that the drip line that'll be underneath here has very little work to do, and most of all, the raspberry roots will be happy. And that's all there is to it, guys, to take advantage of winter so that you have great abundance of raspberries in summer. Anywhere in the northern hemisphere, this will work from January to April, weather permitting, wherever you are. If you want to check out how to grow veggies all year long with my complete garden system, check the trailer out for getbackyardabundance.com. It'll show you how. Thanks, guys, for following along on my YouTube channel. Please click that notification bell and subscribe, and I'll keep on giving you more resources that are hopeful, helpful, and healthy. Till next time.